Penn State versus Ohio State is the biggest duel of the year since, well, Penn State versus Iowa. But that's not the only duel going on this week. I'm going to tell you all about the best duels to watch this weekend and go in depth on the Penn State and Ohio State duel. But there's a lot more going on in the world of wrestling, as it was a crazy weekend with Princeton defeating Cornell and winning the first Ivy League championship, as well as Jaden Cox officially announcing his weight for the 2020 Olympics. So there's a lot to discuss, and I don't want to keep you any longer. So let's stop stalling and start talking wrestling. What's going on, wrestling fans? My name's Josiah, and welcome to Fanco Wrestling. On this channel, we talk all about wrestling news, tips, and lifestyle. And there's a reason that Fanco Wrestling is the #1 wrestling podcast on YouTube. Not only because of views, but also because of awesome viewers like you. So I want to thank you for tuning in to watch this episode of the Fanco Wrestling Show. And without further ado, let's dive into everything going on in the world of wrestling. And I'll be honest with you, there was a lot going on this past weekend. So much going on in the world of wrestling. The first thing I want to talk about is the Jaden Cox announcing his weight. And then we'll get into a couple of these things in the world of wrestling. That's everything going on in the world of wrestling that doesn't actually have a main topic for the show, but I still want to give the attention to, I still want to talk about. So Jaden Cox announced his weight for the Olympic team trials. He's wrestling this weekend in Cuba, and we weren't sure if he was going to wrestle 97 kilos or 86 kilos because, of course, his weight, 92 kilograms, that isn't an Olympic weight. So he had to make a choice. Is he going up? Is he going down? Well, this past week, he made his decision on a USA Wrestling YouTube channel. He decided that he's going up to 97 kilograms, which means he will be wrestling Kyle Snyder off for the Olympic team. And, I mean, there are many other players within that field, too. The field is absolutely loaded with guys like Colin Moore, potentially Bo Nickel, Kyvan Gadsden. This is just a loaded field. If you want to get my full review on that and everything in depth, I made actually a video on it the other day. Now, next up, I mentioned at the top of the show, Princeton defeating Cornell. So this is something that I didn't realize was such big news, but it is. I mean, maybe you don't know, maybe you don't know, but Cornell has not lost an Ivy League match, an Ivy League duel, since like 2003. They have a 92 match win streak in the Ivy League. So Princeton was the first team to upend that streak and defeat Cornell. They ended up winning the Ivy League title for the first time since 1986, I believe it is. Within the last, it's been 30 years since they won a Ivy League title. Now, the final of this match was 19-13, but Princeton was actually down at the beginning of this duel. They were down 10-4, but they rallied back 4 straight wins in the meat of their lineup. They actually started at 285, interestingly enough, but Travis Stefanik locked up a cradle in his match. The duel was pretty darn close, but he ended up locking up a cradle and clinching the match for Princeton at 184 pounds, which gave them the win, and they absolutely freaked out. What was also big for this is that Matt Kolodzic this past weekend actually came out of redshirt and helped them win that title. I'm going to discuss a little bit more about Kolodzic and what it means for 149, but I thought that was a very interesting thing to talk about there. And next up, a big duel was NC State. Now, this was a duel that I attended, and what a duel it was. I mean, between NC State and UNC. Now, they remain undefeated, and if you want to get my full take on that match, you can check out, I actually did a whole vlog on that. You can check that video out on the channel, but went around NC State's campus, got a burger, got a couple things, but the match itself, wow, what an atmosphere. NC State remained undefeated by defeating UNC, but I'll tell you what, UNC almost looked like a better team. They almost look like a better team, in my opinion, with big wins. I mean, biggest win, of course, coming at 197 was an upset over Nick Renan. Austin O'Connor at 149 didn't look the best, but it was just because he was cramping up. I mean, there was something going on with his weight cutting that there's an issue there, and, you know, it was a one-time thing, hopefully. In between the match, during the match, he was, like, holding out his leg, trying to stretch it out, just cramping up. And then I'll tell you what, Hidley's, they did look good, though, for NC State, as well as Tariq Wilson. The way that he's able to defend against his shot, and when a guy's in on his leg, on Tariq's leg, and he can just jump right in and scoop up somebody else's because of his long arms, and that's exactly what he did against Zach Sherman to win that duel, but win that match. Just a couple things I want to talk about. Another big thing that happened this weekend is Mason Paris defeated Anthony Cassiope. This was a very much anticipated match. Not necessarily a duel between Michigan and Iowa. I mean, it was a part of Iowa's revenge tour. The last time that these two teams wrestled, they did lose, but Iowa pretty much blew them out. But the big match was at heavyweight between Paris and Cassiope, and Paris pinned Cassiope in a Turk. Wow. Now, Paris advances to 23-0 on the season, but that's very important because upcoming these guys will be facing off against some of the other top competition, including this week when Cassiope faces off against Gable Steveson. And the other big duels, there were a couple of big duels over the weekend as well. Rutgers defeated Rider, that was a big one. And Michigan State defeated Wisconsin. I think the crazy thing here was that there weren't any crazy upset victories. Seth Gross didn't lose, Evan Wick didn't lose. It was pretty much straight up. Michigan State beat Wisconsin where it counted. They had a big pin at 174, and Caffey he's just been a guy who's coming alive at 184. But the one thing that Wisconsin did have Moran out of the lineup, so that did, of course, hurt them. But just something pretty much straight up, Michigan State beat Wisconsin. And one of the last things I want to discuss before we get into the first main topic of the day is that Pitt Johnstown, they have a coach named Pat Pecora who just became the all-time winningest coach in all of NCAA wrestling. Whether it's D1, D2, D3, NAIA, Coach Pat Pecora is the number one winningest coach in all of college wrestling. That means over the past 40 seasons, I think he's been a head coach, he's accumulated 617 victories. He's 617, 150 some is his record, but 617 wins in NCAA in D2. Pitt Johnstown is a D2 team. They earned the win this past weekend over Mercyhurst, which was a massive victory. The last guy to do this was Oregon State's head coach from the 70s through the 90s, and at that time he had 616 wins and ended up upending that victory 30 years ago, which at the time was 294 wins was the record at the time. But congratulations to Pat Pecora. Wanted to get that out there because I think that's something huge in the world of wrestling that needs to be noted. Now, before I get into the first main topic, let me take a sip of water, and we're going to be talking about Jared Verclaren. Jared Verclaren this past weekend wrestled Brayton Lee, and there's been a lot of talk, a lot of speculation about whether Verclaren got robbed. So did Verk get robbed? Now, before I get into this, I want to mention the sponsor for this video is Be Superior Wrestling. Be Superior is a premium and limited streetwear wrestling brand. They currently have this really awesome wrestling shirt, scrap t-shirt that's available. I received mine last week. It's made out of this super soft cotton material. I mean, unlike any shirt I really have. If you want to get one, you're going to want to get one while supplies last because they're selling out fast. There's a link for that in the description below. I wore mine out to the NC State match last week, and it was such a great, I got a lot of compliments on it. Now, let's talk about Verk versus Brayton Lee. Did he get robbed, and what was up with the phantom point that everybody's talking about? So let's discuss what exactly happened here. So Brayton Lee, top-ranked wrestler, not the number one wrestler in his weight, but at the time, he was at one time number one. These two wrestled in the duel, Minnesota versus Penn State. Now let's walk through the match. First period, Verk comes out, looks strong, got the takedown at the end of the first period with about 20 seconds left. He's up 2-0. Going into the second, he gets a quick escape, and it's 3-0 at the end of the second period. Third period is where a lot of crazy stuff starts going down and where people wonder where Verk may have been robbed. Now, what happened here is they started neutral, so Lee picked neutral. Verk shoots, Lee counters, and nearly gets the takedown on Verclaren. Minnesota throws a challenge block, nothing happens there. Ruling is confirmed as no takedown. Well, Brayton Lee comes straight back out, shoots, and Verclaren shoots again. Brayton Lee counters, gets behind him, gets a takedown, takes him to his back, but there are no back points, and Verclaren escapes. So the score is now 4-2 in favor of Verclaren still. Now, time's ticking down. Lee blast doubles through Verk. It's 4-4. An extra point is, and this is where Verclaren escapes, making it where the score should be 5-4. So with the takedown is 4-4, Verclaren escapes, it's 5-4. But then a point is added onto the board for Brayton Lee. What is going on here? Now, there was no riding time, because like if you were wondering about riding time, no, that was not the point. Some people thought like there were some back points on one of the takedown, but there's no 1 point back points. So it was really weird. But now the score is 5-5. We go into OT. I'll tell you what the phantom point was. There was a reason that there was a point here. And before we get into that, I mean, Verclaren wrestled Brayton Lee well. He wrestled him very, very well. I mean, took him down right away until the third period. I don't know if it was something where like Verclaren was shooting, and then Brayton Lee just kept scoring on his reattacks. And so that was a little bit upsetting for Verclaren. But we get into overtime. Verclaren ends up getting taken down again on the very similar situation, and Brayton Lee gets the victory. So how did he get that point? And was Verclaren actually robbed or not? Well, he got the point because of a stalling call. And in the video, in the match video, which I will have linked up in the description below, or you could just search it on YouTube, Brayton Lee versus Jared Verclaren. It's on the Big Ten Wrestling channel. There were 2 stall calls. And you can't see it in the video because the referee is so far outside of the frame that it's nearly impossible to see. Now, the first stall call was in the second period with about 54 seconds left. Brayton Lee was just driving Verclaren back, driving back, and I see where the stalling call was coming in here, okay? So that's the first stalling call. Then we get to the second stalling call, and that's right here. So with 42 seconds left in the third period, and this was like way on the edge of the frame of the video, so this is the exact screenshot from the video here. The ref calls stalling. As there's a sequence going on where Verk shoots, or Brayton Lee shoots, Verk kind of hops out of it, shoots again, and like squares up with him, and then Verk attempts, and whenever he attempts, even though he was getting driven back a little bit by Lee, the ref throws up the stalling, gives 1 point. The issue was that the point wasn't added until about 15-20 seconds later whenever Verk had the escape. So that was a bit of a problem because, it was a score issue. However, Verclaren did not get robbed. He was out-wrestled in the third period. He can't just be hanging on like that. That was the point. It was a stall call. So, yeah, it wasn't a phantom point. Very interesting point of debate, very interesting point of discussion here is everything that happened with Verclaren. Next up, let's talk about Matt Kolodzik. Kolodzik is back at 149. Where was he, and how is he going to change the field at 149? Wow. Kolodzik was initially taking an Olympic redshirt year. He came out of redshirt this past weekend whenever he helped Princeton defeat Cornell for the first time in many, many years. Cornell had a 92-match win streak, and Princeton ended up defeating them and took the Ivy League Conference Championship home. So, that was with help by Matt Kolodzik. Now, Kolodzik is going to bring some heat to the 149 field. We already know that I'm going to go through these top 5 ranked guys and what it kind of means for that. Now, Kolodzik right now is ranked number 4. Came in, obviously he was unranked last week because it wasn't wrestling, but now he's ranked number 4 by Flow Wrestling. The other top guys at the weight are Sammy Sasso, Pat Lugo, Austin O'Connor, Brock Mahler, Llewellyn, Lee, as well as Deegan. So those are some of the top ranked guys at the weight. Now let's go through each one as well as some of the what the records are, who their big wins are against, and how Kolodzic will stand up against them. So first of all is Sammy Sasso. Sasso's biggest win of the year is against Lugo, and he deserves to be number one because he beat Lugo and he was top of the weight, but then Brayton Lee, that was another guy who he lost to earlier on the season at Cliff Key in Las Vegas, ended up beating him in a duel, and so that's why he deserves to be that number one spot. He's 21-2 on the year. He has a loss as well earlier in the season to Virginia Tech. Has not wrestled Kolodzic yet in his career. Obviously, as a redshirt freshman to Kolodzic senior, these two just haven't met up yet. Number two at the weight is Pat Lugo. Pat Lugo was number one at a point until he lost to Sammy Sasso, as I already mentioned. He has a win over the then number one Austin O'Connor. Lugo is 16-1 right now. That only loss coming to Sasso. Also hasn't wrestled Kolodzic. A guy who has wrestled Kolodzic, though, he has wrestled Kolodzic in the past. Two times. Lugo has wrestled Kolodzic and lost both times 7-4. Two times 7-4. And another guy who has lost to Kolodzic as well is Austin O'Connor. Austin O'Connor, number 3 in the country right now at 149. Lost to Lugo earlier on in the year at Midlands. He's 19-1 on the season. Not really any notable matches other than Lugo. He was out for the beginning part of the year with a little bit of injury, but that's where he stands right now. He also lost, like I said, to Kolodzic last year. Lost 3-2, and that's a similar situation to where Lugo lost to Kolodzic last year twice, 7-4 both times. Now Kolodzic, actually, what's interesting about him is that every guy he lost to last year is now gone, graduated, not wrestling anymore. His losses last year, he had 2 losses to Ashnault of Rutgers, who was obviously ended up winning the national title at 149. He lost to Prince as well as Fine Silver. All those guys are gone, out of the picture now. So Kolodzic hasn't lost to anybody above him. So why isn't he number one? Well, I mean, he's been out all year. That's why he doesn't deserve to be number one at this point in the season. You know, if he beats a Sass, he beats a Lugo or O'Connor or whatever, then he kind of deserves to be up in that top spot. So that's where Kolodzic stands. I think it's going to be interesting to see how he's going to do at this point in the season. I like that people are pulling their Olympic red shirts now, and it's a lot of excitement going on right now in the world of college wrestling. Well, wrestling fans, Penn State and Ohio State goes down this week. This duel goes down Saturday night at the Bryce Jordan Center. Will you be there or will you be watching on TV? Of course, this is on the Big Ten Network. That's the best way to watch the Penn State and Ohio State match. Now, Penn State has won so many years in a row. Of course, they did lose in 2015 the national championship to Ohio State, but they beat them in duels consecutively pretty much every single year. Now, the last time Ohio State actually won at Penn State was back in 2009. So it's been over 10 years since Ohio State's won. I believe that's the exact date. So it's been so long since they've won. And how are they going to do now against Penn State? We're going to talk about that as well as what all of the matchups are. So Penn State right now in the season is 10-2, where Ohio State is 10-3. Penn State has their losses to Iowa as well as Arizona State at the beginning of the year, but they have nice wins over Wisconsin, Nebraska, and Minnesota. On the other side, Ohio State has a loss to Iowa, but victories over Arizona State. Their other losses are to Virginia Tech and Nebraska. Now, let's go through these lineups and talk exactly about what this lineup is going to look like. So these are the lineups right here going on, and I'll go through each of these as well as what the most probable kind of scenario is going to be. And please, before I go any further, comment below on what you think is going to happen in this duel, and make sure that you leave your prediction. So number 2 Penn State versus number 6 Ohio State. Big time rivalry over the past couple of years. Myself as a Penn State fan, this is a duel I've always love to watch. Now, we will see. I mean, the biggest match of the night is obviously going to be Luke Pletcher versus Nick Lee at 141, but we are going to see some other big-time matchups. Ohio State's bringing 7 ranked guys. Penn State's bringing 8 ranked guys. The newest guy in the ranking this week is Jared Verkleeren. Starting off at 125, this is a match where it's not really going to be that exciting, to be honest with you. The most recent common opponent is Brandon Cray of Maryland, where Ohio State actually won that. Penn State lost, both by decisions, though. So, I mean, this is a match I see going most likely in a decision. I could see this being a toss-up either way, a Hanselman or Meredith. Both are, solid wrestlers, but this is a match I see ending in a decision. At 133, RBY's been looking solid. Really just coming into it. I would say all year, but he's really been coming into it, driving into it this past couple weeks. Beating Austin DeSanto, or injury default, whatever you want to call it, okay, nearly beating Seth Gross. He didn't beat him, he got splayed, but he did out-wrestle him, in my opinion. Now, right here, Jordan Decatur was a guy who was ranked number 20 in the country before he lost to King Sandoval of Maryland. And he was a guy, to be honest with you, I think Decatur is a guy who was ranked high because he had an Ohio State singlet. He had a nice win earlier on in the season. I believe it was over Kramer. But, he's kind of shifted from there. Gross, RBY, on the other hand, had tech followed Sandoval, who Decatur had lost to. He had a close match with Gross, as well as Alvarez, actually, and beat Kramer. So those are all common opponents, or similar opponents right there. That'll be an exciting matchup at 133, but Rome Bravillon's really looking strong. Match of the night, look, it's Pletcher and Lee. Pletcher and Lee at 141. Pletcher right now in the season has a 65% bonus point percentage, whereas Nick Lee has 94%. All that meaning is that these two guys score points. They're going for points every single match. And to be honest with you, these two guys have really been excelling this year. Both of them. Both of these guys have been scoring. They've been aggressive. It's the best I've ever seen either of them wrestle in their entire careers. And they've stepped it up this year, and it's exciting to see Pletcher up a weight, now taking on Nick Lee. As far as common opponents for these two, Pletcher this year so far has beat Mitch McKee as well as majored Tristan Moran of Wisconsin. He's also majored Chad Red. Similarly, Nick Lee has a major over Chad Red, a major over Moran, but he actually pinned McKee, and that's like the one little difference there, is that Nick Lee has a couple more pins than Luke Pletcher, but I see this being a thrilling match with these two. So that is, of course, the matchup of the night, in my humble opinion. Luke Pletcher and Nick Lee. We'll be talking a little bit about who is the better wrestler here. I mean, we'll find out, of course, this weekend. But moving on now to 149, Sammy Sasso. That is the other Ohio State wrestler who is ranked number 1 in the country, going up against Jared Verkleeren, the newly ranked wrestler for Penn State at 149. Now, Sasso has had a strong season, although he started out with a couple losses to Virginia Tech as well as to Brayton Lee. He avenged both of those losses and ended up beating who was the number 1 ranked guy in the country at the time, in Pat Lugo, in a duel. Right now, he is number 1 in the weight class. Verkleeren, on the other hand, has a loss to Brayton Lee this past week in what some people thought was like a phantom point giveaway, but no, he actually lost mostly because of stalling calls. That is what hurt him. He does have a win, his best win, upcoming this past couple weeks over Wisconsin's Martin. And he had a close match with Pat Lugo. Wrestled relatively decent. I don't think he was wrestling to win there, but I see Verk kind of coming into it a little bit. Moving on to 157, we have Pfeiffer and Cleary, and these two guys couldn't be more similar. They both have losses to Deacon, close matches against Caleb Romero, They're both juniors. Both have very similar records. This is another match, kind of like 125. I see being exciting in a different way than a Nick Lee versus Luke Pletcher, but I see that being a decent match there and a real toss-up. At 165, we have Ethan Smith, number 14 in the country, going up against Vincenzo Joseph. Now, Smith right now is 15-10 on the season. He was pinned by Isaiah White of Nebraska and has a decision over David McFadden. So, on the other hand, we have Vincenzo Joseph, who has massive wins on the season, of course, over Alex Marinelli, over Evan Wick, major over Evan Wick most recently, actually, which very much impressed me. Vincenzo Joseph's looking tough to beat this year. It may be tough for Smith to do it, but we've seen him pull off upsets in the past, so who knows? At 174 is Romero, actually. Is Romero. So Romero has a loss to Labriola on the season, as well as to Kemmerer. Now, he does have a win over Devin Skatska, and that's probably his best win, but Mark Hall, listen, he pinned Labriola in an exciting last, 10-second of the match, pin to end up helping Penn State win the duel over Nebraska. And ever since he lost to Michael Kemmerer, he has been on fire, and there's the fire burning inside of him. You can just see it. He's just pinning guys fast. He's not getting too fired up about it. He's just going out there. He's winning. He's got one thing on his mind, and that's that national championship. And that's why I think it was almost scary now that Kemmerer beat Hall. And Romero's going to have his hands full. Moving on now to 184. We have a younger matchup in Rocky Jordan going up against Aaron Brooks. Now, this is a redshirt freshman in Jordan going up against the true freshman Brooks, number 12 in the country versus number 8. Another very similar matchup to in this match, kind of like that 157, but in a different way. We just saw the Assad versus Brooks match. Very exciting victory for Brooks there. Very solid match when Assad came out very strong. Now, Jordan has a loss to Assad where Brooks has a win, but they also kind of flip-flop with Taylor Venz, Taylor Venz is a guy who comes out, has solid victories over Darmstadt, but then he loses to Assad, but he has a win over Brooks. So this weight's a one that's kind of all over the place here. But this will be a good matchup here just because it's two young guys for the program. It'll help us see where these two will be going forward, and I'm sure we'll see a lot more of those two wrestling in the future. At 197 is Colin Moore, number 1 in the country, against Shakur Rasheed. Of course, this is Ohio State's third number 1 ranked wrestler to Penn State, who only has 1. I mean, this has to be one of the first times in many years where Ohio State has more number 1 ranked wrestlers than Penn State, because in the past, we've seen these two teams come in with 7 of the top 10 ranked guys in the country between both teams, which is impressive. This year, we see 4 of those in the entire country with Sasso, Pletcher, Moore, and then Joseph on Penn State's side. Hall would have been if he wouldn't have lost to Kemmerer. Now, Moore in history is 2-0 against Shakur Rasheed. Beat him a couple years ago at Big Tens and at Nationals. But Moore has had some issues at Penn State, of course, losing a couple years ago to Anthony Cassard. But to be honest with you, I think Colin Moore's mindset has kind of shifted a little bit this year in certain ways. I think he's a little bit more relaxed, but he's wrestling even better than he has in the past. And I watched actually a little bit of a short on him on the Big Ten Network Wrestling channel, which I highly recommend that you check out, with how Colin Moore processed his upsetting losses over the past season. And I think he has that over Shakur Rasheed, who's still dealing with a couple of lingering injuries. He's looking a little bit better in these past couple of matches, but I don't know if he's going to be able to hang with Colin Moore. At 285, we get to the heavyweight match, and before I talk about that, I do want to say that I'll tell you my score predictions for the Penn State's best case, Ohio State's best case, as well as the most likely case to happen. So 285, we get to Traub and Nevels. Traub and Nevels, both battled against top guys like Stevenson, Cassiope, Hilger. Between the two, I don't think either of them are necessarily there yet at the top, but those are those two guys finally at 285. But let's discuss now the best scoring scenarios as well as what I think is actually going to happen. So the Penn State's best case scenario, I believe, is a 27-10 victory. This is with obviously them winning every single toss up as well as pulling off the upset at 141. And I don't want to call it an upset necessarily, but I mean it's an upset as far as rankings are concerned, but I do think that that match can go either way, and I'm excited to see where that goes because we could see those two wrestle this weekend, as well as Big Tens and Nationals. Next up, Ohio State's best case scenario. I could see them winning 19-15, but they need to have wins at 125, which is a toss-up, 157, which is a toss-up, 141, which is going to be a tough battle. And 184 is another bout that Ohio State will need to win in that Rocky Jordan versus Aaron Brooks match for them to end up pulling off this victory. Because I think a couple of their locks are Colin Moore as well as Sammy Sasso. But on the other side, we have locks from Vincenzo Joseph and Mark Hall. I hesitate to say lock because anything can happen. But, as far as those guys, they're some of the top guys, not just on their team, not just in the Big Ten, but in the entire country, pound for pound, those guys. And that's why my scenario where I see Penn State winning 21-13, but I could see, like I said, I could see this going a couple of different ways depending on what happens. Penn State does have the home mat advantage being at the Bryce Jordan Center. That the BJC is going to be electric. I wish I could be there, but please let me know your score predictions in the comments down below. Now, let's discuss who is better, Nick Lee or Luke Pletcher. These are two of the top-ranked guys at 141 pounds for Penn State and Ohio State, respectively. These two guys have battled their way this whole season. I mean, just absolutely dominating their opponents. Not just winning, but dominating their opponents. And I'm going to talk about who's better as far as statistics are concerned. Not my opinion, but as far as statistics are concerned. Now, just a little bit of background. Pletcher, since the beginning of the season, was number one after beating Dom Demas. That was his best win of the season. Nick Lee has just been rising in the ranks. Pletcher, on the other hand, has bumped up a weight class. He's a three-timer from Pennsylvania to Nick Lee, who is actually a state champ from Indiana. So that's kind of a little bit about that. Now, let's discuss exactly their stats. Let's talk about Luke Pletcher first. So Luke Pletcher right now is 23-0 before going into the Ohio State and Penn State match. He's the number one ranked wrestler in the country. He's a two-time All-American, made it to the round of 16, fourth place. At last couple seasons, he couldn't quite get over Stefan Micic, Tariq Wilson. Last year, he had another issue with Micic as well as Dayton Fix. Now, as mentioned, 23-0 this season, 108-20 overall. So less than 20 career losses in his complete career is pretty impressive. He's a 65% bonus point percentage, 3 falls, 2 techs, and 10 majors on the season. But I think what's more impressive for Luke Pletcher is who he did that against. So he beat, as I already mentioned, Dom Demas at the beginning of the season at the Michigan State Open. Since then, he's beat Real Woods. He took him into a sudden victory match, ended up getting the takedown to win that match. He majored Mitch Moore. That was another big victory for him, as well as Mitch McKee, who he decisioned, and he beat again in the duel. And he also beat Chad Redd that same exact weekend with a major decision at Cliff Keen, Las Vegas, where he ended up winning the Cliff Keen, Las Vegas championship. Two other victories that he had majors were over Moran, and as I already mentioned, he majored Redd once, but he actually ended up majoring him again in the duel. So those are some impressive victories for Luke Pletcher. And then as far as the other guy I want to talk about is Nick Lee. So Nick Lee is a two-time All-American as well, similar to Luke Pletcher. He plays 5th and then 5th, so just one below Luke Pletcher. This season, he's 16-0 overall. 83-12 is his complete college record. So, both have had very similar records in the past. both very dominant records, like kind of within like the 30-5 or 27-6, where I mean they were having a lot more wins than a couple of their losses to those top ranked guys. So Nick Lee this season has really come into his own, really been showing his dominance. 94% bonus point percentage, 4 falls, 7 tacks, and 4 majors. Now, at the beginning of the season, he didn't necessarily have any big wins over big opponents, but coming into the second half of the season, he's majored Chad Red, similar to Luke Pletcher. He tech falled Happel in the Iowa duel. He majored Tristan Moran, and he just pinned McKee in a first period cradle. So, who is the better wrestler? Who is the better wrestler, Luke Pletcher or Nick Lee? I think there are 2 answers here. And no, I don't think I'm taking the easy way out. I want to give an honest opinion. I think that this season, Luke Pletcher has the better wins at this point in the season. I think he has better wins over better guys. We'll see both of these guys wrestle the top ranked guys in the country come Big Tens, come Nationals, but at this point in the season. But who's been more aggressive, who's been better at scoring points, I think that's been Nick Lee. Now, there's nothing against Luke Pletcher. I mean, he's been more aggressive than I've ever seen him, and it's thrilling to watch him wrestle. That's why I think both these guys, it's going to be great to see that match go down this weekend, Ohio State and Penn State. That's this Saturday at, I believe, 7:30 p.m., in State College, Pennsylvania. So what do you think? Who is better, Nick Lee or Luke Pletcher? And let's move on now. This topic actually kind of popped up before, and you got a little bit of preview of it, but how can Virginia Tech beat NC State? NC State, of course, is undefeated on the season right now, 13-0. They have not lost one duel this season. Their last loss coming last year to actually Pitt, an ACC opponent. Now, this is the battle for the ACC championship, really. I mean, if Virginia Tech can defeat NC State, they have a real shot to win that, but NC State is looking to just flat out win that. This week, I mean, it's their toughest match of the season to beat Virginia Tech. Next week, they take on Duke, so, I don't think that's really going to be any necessarily big threat there, but they're coming off a big win over UNC, whereas UNC has already beat Virginia Tech this season, who is 11-1. Now, this match is going down in Raleigh. It's going down at NC State, Virginia Tech, and NC State on Valentine's Day. Now, the one thing I want to mention is that if you're in the Raleigh area or want to take a trip to North Carolina this summer, well, Kerry Colat has 3 camps going on this summer. Whether you're a prospective high school athlete or just want to fine-tune your technique. I mean, Colat camps are the place to learn from college athletes from the Olympian Kerry Colat. Now, camps are limited, so make sure that you want to reserve your spot now. You can check that out, linked in the description below. I highly recommend these camps. My brother actually went to one of these camps a couple years ago at Campbell Wrestling, and it's a beautiful area down here in North Carolina. It's also where I'm from. So let's get into these duels. Virginia Tech and NC State. Now, what does Virginia Tech need to do to win this duel? I'm not going to go through all these matchups, but I wanted to bring up the lineups here, Virginia Tech and NC State. So, I mean, we're going to be starting off strong at 125 with some good matchups. In the past, Camacho had beat Prada, but that was in the past. That was a couple years ago, I think. But that's going to be one key match that Virginia Tech will need to win. And yes, it will be an upset, we'll see how Prada has grown over the past couple of years. 133 is another weight that Virginia Tech's going to have to win. Girardi's going to have to beat Trumley, and that's just kind of where they are in the series. They're 1-1 against each other. Each of them has a win against the other, so that's going to be a key matchup. Tariq Wilson has been looking very, very strong, but I wouldn't call that necessarily a key matchup. But 149 I would call a key matchup where Virginia Tech's going to have to win. Now, I kind of looked at how did Virginia Tech beat Ohio State at the beginning of the year when Ohio State was number 3. That was one of their biggest victories of the season. And one of those, of course, was whenever Brent Moore pinned Sammy Sasso at 149. Now, Brent Moore is not in the lineup anymore. We have Bryce Andonian, who is a freshman. He's 15-5 on the season, whereas Layton is 17-7, a sophomore. Both young guys, we could see this match go either way. If Virginia Tech wants to win, they got to win that. If NC State wants to win, they got to win that. It's as simple as that. These next couple of matchups are, kind of NC State is the favorite here at 157 with number 2 Hayden Hidley. He's the favorite to win that duel, but at 165 is an interesting one. David McFadden and Thomas Bullard. Now, this is a match where Virginia Tech actually lost this match against Ohio State at 165, but they still ended up winning the duel. David McFadden was upset. I think that weight cut may be sort of a problem with McFadden this year. We've seen him lose the past couple matches maybe shouldn't have lost. One of them being losing by tech fall to Kennedy Monday. He just kind of beat him down pretty darn hard. Now, this is going to be a matchup that could go either way, I believe. And at 174 is another marquee matchup as far as similarities are concerned. Now, like I said, Virginia Tech, Ohio State, like to compare those two just because of that upset there. Now, Cody Hughes actually beat Rocky Jordan in that match. Rocky Jordan is now number 12 in the country, and so that just shows that dominance there. Daniel Bullard is number 15 in the country. It will be interesting to see how Hughes does. Hughes does have some losses on his record to, ranked unranked guys, but that's a matchup there. And then this is the best match of the night is Hunter Boland going up against Trent Hidley. Boland is 21-1. Hidley is 21-2. Now, the reason is that this matchup is so big is number 2 versus number 3. Now, I think this is going to be a heck of a match and one that, depending on which team wins, it could really swing the match in their favors. And then, in the past week, we saw Nick Reenan lose to UNC. He was ranked, kind of dropped out of those rankings. And then at 285, we have John Borge going up against Deontay Wilson. That will be another interesting match. Wilson, of course, won the duel for NC State last week against UNC. Now, listen, I'll put it simply as this. Virginia Tech wins at 125, 133, and 149. They have to win their ranked matchups at 65 and 84. They got to win those. But, otherwise, NC State's going to be very, very difficult to beat. There's a reason they're undefeated, and this is an exciting ACC championship, ACC matchup. Now, let's move on to the next topic of the day. And the last main topic of the day, I'm going to tell you 3 matches that you can't miss. I'm going to tell you 3 college duels that you cannot miss this weekend. There are 3 very exciting duels, and I'm just going to get right into it. So, first, an honorable mention I want to say is number 9 Pitt is going up against number 8 UNC. Now, UNC still is able to beat Pitt, Cornell, and ASU. They still have them on their schedule, and if they beat all 3 of those teams, they're looking like a dominant team. It's unfortunate they lost to NC State last week because if they had beat them, wow, what a team. But UNC is a team that's been putting on a performance the entire year. Now, the first duel that I want to talk about going on this weekend is going on Saturday, and that's Penn State versus Ohio State. Penn State and Ohio State. Ohio State's last win in State College was back in 2009. There are 7 ranked matchups going on here. Now, the 7 ranked the best match, of course, of the night is going to be Nick Lee going up against Luke Pletcher. These are number 1, number 2 ranked guys in the entire country. Both these guys have been looking the best that they've looked this entire season. And the fact that it's going down this weekend, we're going to get a lot of insight into what's going on at Big Tens as well as the NCAA tournament. Now, the other big matchups is going to be Romero and Hall at 174. We're going to see a battle of the youngins at 184 in Rocky Jordan and Aaron Brooks. And then we also wonder, can can Colin Moore come back to Penn State and stay on top? The last time he traveled there, of course, he lost to Anthony Cassar. I happen to think that he's a little bit of a different mindset this year. He's looking a little bit more relaxed and looking like a strong wrestler this year. The next duel I want to discuss is going on also on Saturday, and this is Iowa against Minnesota. Now, this isn't necessarily a massive duel this weekend, but it's one that I want to discuss. It's number 1 versus number 13, Minnesota. But there are 4 or 5 ranked matchups in here. We'll see if Max Murin wrestles. We'll also see, if DeSanto's going to wrestle now or if he's still kind of injured, depending on how these guys do. Of course, that match is Murin versus McKee at 141. That's one of the ranked matchups that could happen. We'll also see Pat Lugo take on Brayton Lee, and this is a match I've been dying to see. Brayton Lee has already beat Simi Sasso this season. Of course, Sasso ended up avenging that loss, but this is a weight that I think is just in constant flux. And now with Matt Kolodzic back in there at 149, ooh, this is just heating up really, really good. But the matchup of the night here is going to be Anthony Cassiope versus Gable Stevenson. Now, Cassiope is 15-1 on the season. His most recent loss coming to Mason Parris, where he's pinned actually in a Turk. Now, Stevenson is undefeated on the season, came into the season a little bit late, but he was not able to wrestle against Mason Parris whenever those two teams wrestled in January. So that's unfortunate there, but now we will hopefully see Cassiope versus Stevenson go down. Cassiope's had strong victories on the season already against Isley, Stencil, and Neville's. Stevenson's best win has been over Jordan Woods. He hasn't necessarily faced the competition that he has last year, but he's still undefeated, and we'll see how he does this weekend. Hopefully we do see that match going on. And one of the last big matches going on this weekend, North Carolina wrestling has just been absolutely absurd with NC State, with UNC, with Campbell. These teams have been blowing up and doing extremely well in the NCAA. And NC State is an undefeated team right now, undefeated 13-0, going up against Virginia Tech. The ACC championship is really on the line here. And NC State's undefeated record. They wrestle Duke next week, which that probably won't be a matchup for this. So Virginia Tech's the last team that has the potential to beat NC State. This goes down Friday night on February 14th. Now, there are 5 ranked matchups we could see, including one of the best matchups is going to be between Hunter Bolin and Trent Hidley at 184. Another big match we're going to see is between McFadden and Thomas Bullard, but a couple of other things that are exciting within this duel are that there are a lot of guys who aren't necessarily ranked, but I think are very similar as far as style, as far as competition is concerned, and that's what makes an exciting duel a lot of the times. Last week, whenever UNC and NC State faced off, it came down to the heavyweights, where neither of them were ranked, neither of them were, that they're not the top-ranked guys in their weight class, but they're still battling it out to win it for their team, and that's what I love to see. Now, which matches will you be watching this weekend? Make sure you let me know in the comments below. And guys, that's going to do it for the Fanco Wrestling Show. Now, one thing before I sign off, I want to say that if you love this hat, please let me know in the comments below, because there's a chance that you may have an opportunity to get one of these in the upcoming weeks, as I may be launching something a little bit more special, and that's going to be related to the Fanco ranking show, as well as maybe some more vlogs and some other different things. So that's this Fanco wrestling hat right here. In the upcoming weeks, a couple of things I want to discuss are what is the most stacked weight class of this season. That's a little preview for the upcoming videos. What's the most stacked weight class, as well as who are the most dominant wrestlers in college right now, and what are some of the best rivalries. There's just some videos I may have coming out in the upcoming weeks, so make sure that you check that out. And if you're not already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so that you can see these upcoming videos, because you're not going to want to miss that. Until next time, guys, keep watching wrestling.